let's get into this week's required viewing. John, remind us about your pick and let's talk about it.
Well, I picked a movie, a comedy from 1971 that I had heard about for years and was kind of a blind spot for me as a fan of both writer-director and co-star ElaineMay, and a big fan of Walter Matthau, who's like one of those actors that you might just think I'm just going to do a Matthau watch. You know, you might just
Yeah.
pick his movie. He's like if he was working today in this prime that we see him in this movie, I think he would be one of those actors that we talk about like, oh, what's his next thing going to be? And he's just a reliable guy. And I knew that this movie had some things about it that were a little broad, and also a little bit it's a bantery comedy with a lot of funny dialogue, which we kind of expect from ElaineMay, because that's sort of how she cut her teeth getting into the business. She and Mike Nichols were a highly influential comedy team, and it was very much two-hander, sketches that they would do together. That were built around this very funny repartee. So there's like a lot of absurd humor in her stuff, and also as an Ishtar apologist, that's her writer and director effort as well, writing and directing effort. That is like a famous failure because of how much it cost. Not necessarily the movie itself, although the movie is like uh, uh, awkward in some ways, but like I think that she's just a person who has a particular brand of humor, and like the first 10-15 minutes of Ishtar is some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen, and that's where her humor shines in that. But she's just another kind of comedic voice that, because of her slightly excessive and mysterious ways, she hasn't made a lot of movies. She's only directed a few movies over all these years, but she pops up in odd places, and she's always very funny. And yeah, I knew this was supposed to be one of those 70s movies that had a lot of character,
Right.
and kind of felt modern, maybe to a modern audience in some ways, in terms of the things it's getting at. I felt a little bit of like Wes Anderson in this,
Yeah.
in different directors. I was like, oh, some people definitely have watched this movie. But yeah, so for me, it was, like I said, a little bit of a blind spot, and I thought it would be fun after the incredible bleakness of our last movie that we watched, which was that Palm Trees and Power
Yeah.
Lines.
Caroline.
Yeah.
It would be fun to watch something that was perhaps funny and light. And I didn't know how dark this movie was going to be, but I was sort of pleased that it had a sweet heart, to be found within it, even though it does start off as this incredibly vicious character portrait of this useless man, this completely useless trust fund baby who has mismanaged his life. But yeah, I guess I would throw it to you guys, since all of us have seen this for the first time, I think, in this viewing. What did this movie, was this on your radar at all, and what did you think of it, Ronald?
I never heard of it. I like Walter Matthau. I think about him, the grandpa or gramps,
Grumpy old man.
grumpy old man. He really made me happy watching those movies, and Dennis the Menace
Yeah.
was so good in that. So I hadn't really seen a bunch of his older movies, so I was excited to see him as a young man, because he's like he's like what's his name?
He's like 50 something in this movie.
Yeah,
Right. But he also was a guy who always looked 50 something. I feel like when he
yes,
was 10, he
Yeah.
probably looked 50
he's
something.
Morgan. He's a white Morgan Freeman. In that, if you look at Morgan Freeman when he was supposed to be young, you're like,
Yeah.
he was like clearly 45 at this point when he
Right.
was supposed to be 20. But yeah, I was very excited to see it, and he came through, man. Like these comedy notes that he was kind of expecting, he did a little more than that. He had a lot of like range, and he apparently does a bunch of voices. Like the voices that he was doing kind of surprised me as well. But it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I
What about you,
mean,
Steve?
I'm in a similar boat. Like, I think I maybe had heard about this movie only because of Elaine May and the stars of the movie, and it kind of being a movie that I feel like I've seen on some lists of like comedies that you need to see that are like all time type things, but I'd never seen it, and yeah, I feel like the same way. I don't know that I've ever like taken a dive into the like 70s era Matthau, even 80s stuff. Like I don't really think I've seen many of those movies outside of, I don't know, like The Odd Couple or something like that. But yeah, my generation, or of my exposure during my growing up, it was more of the stuff that came out in the 90s, things like a lot of the Jack Lemmon stuff, the grumpy old man, grumpy, you're out to sea, like those comedies that came out when he was, he was probably, what I guess, in his 70s or so at that point, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I always like really liked him. And I remember my grandfather always thought he was really great and funny. And any exposure that I had to any of those older films were definitely through my grandparents. But yeah, I mean, I kind of, it's funny you said the Wes Anderson thing, because like he's kind of come up this week a few times and talking about like the trailer for his new film, Asteroid City, which I think looks great. And I also got a little bit of that vibe from this movie too. I kind of was thinking about that during the movie. But yeah, I thought it was really good. I mean, it feels, not to say like, not to be cliche about it, but I know one of her other films, I think it was Heartbreak Kid or one of them, like it got a remake. This movie feels like it's wherever you fall on that idea, like kind of prime for a remake. I feel like this movie like is pretty relevant today, and even some of the
the
themes,
commentary on a profoundly useless rich person, I feel like
yes,
today would have a
exactly.
special cutting quality to it, because this guy is just like crashing into the real world. He never really has to, but there's that moment when he comes out at the beginning and he hits the street and he just, I'm poor.
Yeah, yeah.
He's going around saying goodbye to all the
I love
affectations of a rich person's life. I thought that was really funny.
I just feel like that disconnectedness, like that the scene with the banker is probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Oh, that was great.
Just like how that banker's like, he's like, like the capital, the money, the cash.
Yeah.
How else can I say this? Oh no, that's everything I can say. Like I actually rewound it and watched that scene a couple times.
Really
like
good.
That scene was so good, and Matthau was incredible in that. Just like how just out of touch he is with the concept of what's being like something
that he's run out of money. You have accountant or his financial lawyer, or whatever that guy was, is telling him you're basically out of money, but he's being so gently condescending about it. And it's funny that you mentioned like a remake, Steve, because in my mind I was like, who does this guy remind me of? And I think it's John Hodgman. I think that I could see John Hodgman playing that part of just really dry, very like gently sarcastic, but just kind of relishing this moment to tell this guy what you think before he's gone from your life forever, maybe.
Yes.
But the way he told him, like, I only helped you this far so that I could tell myself that it was,
that I did everything. Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, so this guy's out of money and he picks this woman that he's going to marry. And very quickly, I just loved how he's so useless. Very quickly, he goes to, I have to murder someone for their money. Like, there's no chance that he's just going to get a job. And I think, I mean, we're talking a lot about Walter Matthau because it's definitely that character's movie. Yeah. But ElaineMay even played the character of Henrietta out of wanting, she said, because the studio wanted Carol Channing. And ElaineMay said, no, we need someone who's going to disappear. It's about the man overpowering this woman in a way. Right. So we need a woman who kind of disappears. And I think she nailed the tone. I mean, there was something about Henrietta that I never felt fully sorry for because she was such a quirky individual. And I think that it helps. The movie could seem kind of mean-spirited, I think, if ElaineMay didn't bring a certain sort of her own kind of obliviousness to Henrietta, know? But also that she's really smart, and I think that that's something that comes through, and that might be what kind of wins him over to the extent that he gets won over by her, is the fact that she's smart and she's a person who has even if small accomplishment that she has in this film, but at least she accomplishes something, which is something he's never done. I thought that was just kind of a funny turn of events.
Yeah, no, I mean, if anything, I feel like if anything seems a little, it's kind of subtle in terms of like how, this forced marriage or this rushed marriage for his benefit, like ends up actually benefiting him in ways that is beyond money. Like I like the idea of like when he gets into her world, he sees like, how much she's being taken advantage of beyond just the fact that he's taking advantage of her the most out of anybody, and he's like trying to help in ways that he can't even.
He's like, don't drain her money. I need that money.
Right.
But then it kind of turns into something else. Right.
And yeah, it turns into a quote unquote lesson for him, so that all kind of how that ramps up, I thought was pretty fun. And yeah, I don't know. I like the moment, like, when they're in the river and he kind of sees the fern and like, it's like that, like something clicks, it's like, oh, I care about this fern. So I care about this woman. I don't know. That all worked pretty well for me. I mean, again, I don't really have much awareness of a lot of the cast in this movie. I mean, beyond like the stars that they are, especially Matthau, but seeing some other faces pop up of people that I recognize.
Doris Roberts from Everybody Loves Raymond.
Yeah.
Did you see Philip Drummond there? He was in one scene.
Really?
Drummond from Different Strokes was.
Yeah. I was saying in the background at the wedding, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where he was.
Yeah, I think I saw him in there too.
And James.
Yeah, no, this is like a fun movie, man.
was great. I love the uncle scene where he's just this kind of like gluttonous guy the whole time, but you could tell he too, like the lawyer, is sort of taking pleasure in this guy's, you know, downfall.
Yeah.
One other thing I just wanted to mention, just from a filmmaking standpoint, before we move on from this, is that the way that ElaineMay made her movies, frequently the reason that she ran over budget, because this movie was budgeted at like 1.8 million and supposedly went up to 4 million. It made 5, so it wasn't a flop. But she just shoots and shoots and shoots and shoots, and then kind of finds it in the edit. And there was originally like an hour longer version of this that supposedly did get into like murders and characters dying and stuff. And the studio
and like him killing people for her, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. You can see
yeah.
how
I've read an article about like how he had poisoned 2 people.
Yeah,
because there's scenes in there where he's reading about like poisons,
right?
And like he ends up like killing 2 people. Like,
well, you can picture the people that he could kill. Like I think her lawyer who had a crush on her felt like he's a prime candidate for getting killed, and one of those workers from her house that he gets rid of seems like they would be too.
Exactly.
But either way, it like supposedly the studio took it away and edited it down, and everybody at the studio was really happy with it. But ElaineMay was sort of shut out and has never really, I don't know if she ever has acknowledged the film. She's always said that her version would be better, but I think that's interesting that someone would shoot a comedy and overshoot like that. And, you know, Judd Apatow is someone who's put out like a 2.5-hour comedy that you think, this could have been tightened up a little. But I do think it's interesting to think the tone of this movie could have been so different. And it's that rare case, a lot of critics even said this, where you might side with the studio taking somebody's movie away because this movie doesn't feel like it needs another hour, and it doesn't feel like it needs a lot of dark stuff to complicate the very dark idea already that this guy's first thought is, let me find somebody to kill. Anyway, I was happy to have finally kind of crossed this off the list, and it got me thinking about that Walter Matthau. There's definitely some, you know, Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. There's some things like that I think would be fun movies to revisit. So I might dive into some Matthau Town.
Cool.
Matthau Town. That's the channel, and that should be one of the rows in like Netflix or whatever.
It's the jowliest town in the world.
Yeah,
so
the most hangdog town that ever there was.
Yeah, I was just want to mention real quick for anybody that if you didn't get to watch this pick with us for this episode and you want to watch it, just as a reminder, I watched it on Pluto TV. It's on there for free. Pluto TV is entirely free. There are ads, you know, they're pretty brief. It doesn't feel pretty. I did not feel disruptive to me. But if you want to check it out for free, it is on. It's on Pluto TV.
The version I saw, I believe, was remastered. It was really looked great. I don't know what. I mean, this is a 1970s movie, and it definitely still had the graininess and the kind of, you know, that kind of hacked together quality of the film that I was suggesting it might have from the way that she shoots movies. But it did, you know, it looked really, really good too. So I think that you know, there's an opportunity to really enjoy the way this looks. I don't know if it looked good on. You said Pluto.
It looked great on Pluto.
Okay,
yeah, it was.
Cool.
I don't know what version it is, but it looked really good.
I'm glad they're using. I would think that they would not be using like the best versions of stuff, but it seems like they whenever I've watched something on there, it usually has been up to the resolution I would want, because I'm, you know, somewhat picky about that on my big television. I'll watch something on my computer that's not high res, but on television, I don't really want to watch a movie and not enjoy the way it looks. So Pluto's a great option. It just adds 20 minutes maybe to your view time because of the commercials.
Not even that, man. Like I think each commercial is only like barely 30 seconds. And there was only like maybe 6 or 7, I feel like, that really paid attention to. It was very brief. It was not. They
probably put more in properties that are
I'm sure
more highly regarded. So maybe
I'm sure
this kind of deep catalog like this.